Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum dear students. My name is Maliha Fatima, physics teacher from DPS Girls Senior Wing Model Town Lahore. This is lecture number 15 of 9th class physics. Today we will discuss 5th lecture of chapter number 3 dynamics. In this lecture we will discuss friction, rolling friction, braking and skidding, advantages and disadvantages of friction and methods of reducing friction. Before starting the lecture, let's have a brief review of the previous lecture. In the previous lecture, we have studied force and the momentum, according to which when a force acts upon a body, then acceleration is produced and is equal to the rate of change of momentum of the body. That is, force is equal to change in momentum divided by time. It means force is equal to Pf minus Pi divided by time. Then we have discussed the law of conservation of momentum, according to which the momentum of an isolated system of two or more than two interacting bodies remains constant. And examples of the law of conservation of momentum: motion of the air-filled balloon when air escapes out of it, recoil of the gun after shooting the bullet, and the motion of rocket and the jet engine was also discussed in the previous lecture. Today we will discuss friction. Friction is the force that opposes the motion of the moving objects. Friction is the force that comes into action as soon as the body is pushed or pulled over a surface. So it means that whenever you push or pull a body on any surface, then friction comes between them. If you rub your palm over different surfaces like table, carpet, polished marble surface and bricks, then you will find that if the surface is smoother, then it is easier to move your palm over the surface. Like in the above mentioned surfaces, you will feel easier to move your palm over smooth table and polished marble surface. But it will be harder to move the palm over the rough carpet and brick surface. Furthermore, if you will press your palm more hardly while rubbing over the different surfaces, then you will feel that it is more difficult to move. From this experiment, we come to know that friction depends on two factors. Number 1, nature of the two surfaces in contact, and number 2, pressing force between the two surfaces. Here, if nature of the surface is rough, then friction is more, and if nature is smooth, then friction is less. And if the pressing force, that is weight of the moving object, is more, then again friction is more, and if pressing force is less, then friction is less. Now, while learning more about friction, there comes a question that why friction opposes motion. So, for the answer of this question, if we observe a polished smooth surface under a microscope, then we come to know that no surface is perfectly smooth, and even a polished surface has bits and bumps over it. As you can see in the picture, that the magnified view of the smooth surfaces in contact shows the gaps and contacts between them. These contact points between the two surfaces form a sort of cold welds. That is, these points become locked with each other and then resist the surfaces from sliding over each other. Furthermore, if we put some weight over the upper block, then it will increase the pressing force, so it will make the cold welds more strong and it will increase the resistance between the two surfaces. So, greater is the pressing force, greater will be the friction between the sliding surfaces. In order to learn about force of limiting friction, we must know about static friction first. Static means at rest. So, if a body is not moving on applying force, then the friction at that time is called static friction, and it is equal to the applied force. So, if we increase the applied force on the body which is at rest, then the friction also goes on increasing. This friction during the rest of the body, which increases with the increase of the applied force and it is also equal to the applied force, is called static friction. But you must know that friction can increase to a certain maximum value and it does not increase beyond this value. So, the maximum value of friction after which the body starts to move is called force of limiting friction. You may say that the maximum value of friction when the body is on the verge of slipping is called limiting friction and is represented by Fs. It depends upon pressing force, that is normal reaction between the two surfaces. It means that on increasing the pressing force, limiting friction also increases. So, the ratio between the limiting friction and the normal reaction is always a constant, and this constant is called coefficient of friction, and it is represented by mu. Thus, we can say that mu is equal to Fs divided by R, and Fs will be equal to mu R. As we know that normal reaction is always equal to the weight of the body, so we can say that R is equal to mg. So the above equation becomes Fs is equal to mu mg. Now, next topic is rolling friction. The force resisting the motion of rolling body on a surface is known as rolling friction. Rolling of ball or wheel on the road is an example of rolling friction. Wheel is the most important invention of mankind. The important thing about wheel is that it rolls instead of sliding over a surface. This greatly reduces the value of friction. When the axle of the wheel is pushed, the force of friction between the wheel and the ground at the point of contact provides the reaction force which is opposite to the applied force. The wheel would not roll on pushing it in the absence of friction between the wheel and the ground. Instead, it will start slipping over the surface. It means that friction is necessary for rolling a body over a surface. From this fact, we come to know that it is dangerous to drive on a wet or the slippery road because the friction between the road and the tires is very small in this case, and with very small value of friction, rolling becomes difficult and hence it increases the chance of slipping the tires from the road. Threading on the tires. Threading on the tires is designed to increase the friction. Hence it increases the road grip and makes the driving safe even on the wet road. As you can see in the picture, tire has different designs on it to increase the friction. Now, in order to compare the rolling friction and sliding friction with each other, rolling friction is very less than the sliding friction. There are two reasons for it. Number one, the contact area between the two surfaces is very small in case of rolling friction, and number two, the wheel rolls instead of rupturing the cold welds. Because of these facts, the ball bearings or roller bearings are used in the moving parts of the machines to reduce the friction between different parts of the machine, because ball bearings convert the sliding friction into rolling friction. The ball bearings, as you can see in the picture, are the small steel balls which are introduced between the two surfaces of the machines, and they convert the sliding friction into rolling friction. Now the next topic is slipping of vehicles on the road. We know that in order to move a vehicle or to stop a moving vehicle on the road, friction between the tires and the road is required. So, if the road is slippery or the tires are worn out, then friction is not enough to roll the wheels. So, instead of rolling, the wheels slip over the road. Thus, for the wheels to roll, the force of friction between the tires and the road is necessary to prevent it from slipping. Braking and skidding. If we want to stop a car quickly, then a large force of friction is required between the tires and the road. But tires can provide a limited value of friction. So, if the brakes are applied too strongly, then the wheels of the car will lock up at once, means they will stop rotating. But due to the large momentum of the car, as it was moving with very high speed before applying the brakes, the car will skid and it will lose its directional control, and it may result in an accident. As you can see in this video, that while taking a turn at very high speed, when the driver applies the brakes, then the wheels of the car stop rotating and then the car skids and loses its directional control. Hence, in order to reduce the chance of skidding, brakes should not be applied too hard so that they lock up the rolling motion, especially at very high speed. Moreover, it is unsafe to drive a vehicle with worn out tires which are unable to provide the necessary friction. The next topic is advantages and disadvantages of friction. First, we will discuss disadvantages of friction. If we want to move at very high speed, then friction is undesirable because it opposes the motion and hence limits the speed of the moving objects. Secondly, most of our useful energy is lost in the form of heat and sound due to friction between various parts of the machines. Thirdly, friction also causes wear and tear of the moving parts. As you can see in the picture, that different things worn out due to friction. Now, advantages of friction. In the previous cases, friction was undesirable, but sometimes it is most desirable. Like, we cannot write on the paper without friction, we cannot walk and run on the ground without friction. Like, we can experience this fact by running on the slippery surface, as it offers very little friction and it may cause an accident. We cannot stop a moving body in the absence of friction. Like, it becomes dangerous to apply brakes too hard while moving very fast on a slippery road. Birds could not fly in the absence of air resistance because the reaction of the pushed air enables them to fly. Thus, in many situations we need friction, while in some situations we need to reduce the friction. But after learning about these, we can say that life is not possible without friction. The last topic is methods of reducing friction. Friction can be reduced by various methods, like it can be reduced by making the sliding surfaces smooth. In fast moving objects, the friction can be reduced by making their shape streamlined, like the fish shape. As the shape of the racing cars, aeroplanes, bullet trains is made streamlined to reduce the air friction, because this shape causes the smooth flow of air and hence minimize the air resistance. Friction can also reduced by lubricating the sliding surfaces. As in machines, for its smooth running, we lubricate the parts of the machines by oiling them, because in this case the friction is converted from sliding friction or friction of solids to the friction of liquids, and we know that friction of liquids is very less than that of the friction of the solids. Friction is greatly reduced by using ball bearings or roller bearings, because they convert sliding friction into rolling friction, which is very less than that of the sliding friction. In the end of the lecture, there are some related exercise questions which you can easily answer now after learning this lecture. In question number 3.2, define the following term: force of friction. Now, force of friction is the force that opposes the motion of the moving objects. In question number 3.3, what is the difference between sliding friction and rolling friction? So, the force between the sliding objects and which opposes the motion of the sliding objects is called the sliding friction. while the force resisting the motion of rolling body on a surface is known as rolling friction. Sliding friction is having large value, while the rolling friction is having very small value. It is about 100 times less than that of the sliding friction. In case of sliding friction, the contact area between the two surfaces is large, but in case of rolling friction, the contact area between the two surfaces is small. Then in question number 3.14, describe two situations in which force of friction is needed. So in the advantages you have learned many situations, like you can write we need friction to walk on the ground and to stop moving vehicles. We also need friction to write on the paper. Friction is needed to hold anything and to fix a nail in the wall. There are so many situations. You may write any two situations. Then question number 3.15. How does oiling the moving parts of a machine lowers the friction? So as we know that the friction in case of liquid surface is less than that of the solid surface. So by oiling the parts of the machine, we change the friction of solid surface to liquid surface, which reduces the friction. Then in question number 3.16, describe ways to reduce friction. So there are 3-4 ways to reduce friction which has been discussed in detail in the lecture. You can write all these ways. Then 3.17, why rolling friction is less than sliding friction. This question also has been discussed in chapter as a comparison between rolling and the sliding friction. Then in question number 3.18, what do you know about limiting friction and skidding of the vehicles? Both these topics have discussed in detail. Then in question number 3.19, what would happen if all friction suddenly disappears? So if all friction suddenly disappears, then if we are moving, then we will not be able to stop moving. And if we want to walk, then we would not be able to walk. We cannot hold anything without friction. We cannot write without friction. In short, we can say that life is not possible without friction. So I hope so after listening this lecture you will be able to learn about friction. So good luck and Allah Hafiz.